I stepped into the lobby of Methodist Hospital just after noon, my badge still clipped to my blazer from the layover rounds I'd led that morning in Seattle. The air was sterile, humming with the rhythm of machines and faint urgency. I didn't tell anyone I was coming. Not Delphine, not Russell, not Silas. I wasn't even supposed to know. Rachel, a friend from med school, called me after seeing Silas's name come through the ICU roster. He coded twice, she said. Stabilized now, but you should know. Know what I'd wondered, that my family still didn't see me as family. I walked to the nurse's desk, gave Silas's name, and waited. The nurse looked up, hesitated, then tilted her head. Sorry, are you the chief doctor from Seattle? I nodded once, her voice, softened eyes widening with the recognition I never received at home. I thought I saw you in the Westline Review. You wrote that policy paper before I could respond. I caught movement in the corner of the waiting area. Delphine scrolling through her phone like it was a shield. Russell, arms crossed, looking at me the way he used to inspect rookies on patrol, unimpressed. Neither of them stood. Silas's room was just behind a glass door. The nurse opened it for me, and for a second I thought about walking away. But I stepped in. He was conscious barely, hooked to monitor's wires blooming from his chest. He turned his head, blinked once. Didn't speak. I asked the nurse for the vitals update, reviewed his notes, and signed off on his care as visiting consultant. Not because I had to, but because I could. No one said thank you. No one asked why I came. They never did. My mind slipped backward without permission 7 years earlier. Silas's birthday party. I remember the crunch of patio gravel under my shoes and the faint taste of ginger ale in a wine glass handed to me like a prop. The house was crowded, aunts in pastel suits, cousins passing babies, everyone too loud, too close. My chair was by the window, half sun, half shadow. I wasn't in any of the framed photos that lined the table. I checked. Dad stood for a toast, crisp button-down, tucked, too tight, eyes already shining. To Silas he said, "Our pride and joy. Every family's got one." Then a pause, a smirk. And every family's got a waist, too. Laughter. Honest, unfiltered. Even Aunt Gwen dabbed her eyes like it was the best joke she'd heard in years. I smiled too. Small, controlled. My mother gave me that look, tight lips, slight tilt of her head. Don't ruin this. So I didn't. I never did. That same week, I had published my first co-authored research paper in the Journal of Health Equity. The congratulations came from strangers, colleagues, my supervisor. Flowers, emails, handshakes. But not from home. Not even a text. That was the week I stopped expecting applause from people who never learned to pronounce my ambition without flinching. And that's when the paper came, folded once, neatly placed on the kitchen table. It was the summer after my second year at UT Austin, the kind of August that made the air feel heavier than my thoughts. I'd come home for 3 days, just long enough to do laundry, breathe familiar air, and pretend the house still felt like mine. Dinner that night was too formal. Linen napkins, real silverware. My mother lit the tall candles she usually reserved for holidays. No one said why. After dessert, Delphine smiled and said, "Can we talk for a minute, honey?" I followed them into the kitchen expecting small talk, or maybe a passive dig about my weight or posture. Instead, the table was already set with papers. A single page on top, clean and centered. My name printed at the top in block letters. "We've been talking." She began folding her hands like she was offering a blessing. "You've been working so hard, and we're concerned. Medical school is so competitive. So stressful. There are other options." Russell leaned forward. "There's a 2-year program at the community college, medical assistant. It's still healthcare, good hours, practical, woman-friendly." I stared at the paper. It was already filled out. Only the signature line was blank. "If you choose this route," Delphine added, "we'll cover your rent. You can stay home. Save money. And if I don't," Russell didn't blink, "then we can't support choices we don't believe in." No yelling, no slammed fists. Just a door offered open, then quietly closed. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I walked to my room and began to pack. 10 minutes later, Delphine appeared in the doorway. "You're really choosing strangers over your own family?" I didn't answer. My suitcase was small. It held 2 sets of scrubs, a worn pair of sneakers, and a cardboard box I kept under my bed. Inside were pieces of me they never displayed: honor roll certificates, a ribbon from the state science fair, a laminated newspaper clipping about my tutoring work. I left behind the framed photo Delphine had picked for my nightstand back when they still believed in who I might become. Russell stood at the front door. "You don't know what you're walking into," he said. "I know," I replied. "That's why I'll earn who I become." The porch light flickered as I stepped into the night. I didn't look back. I just placed the box on my lap, shut the cab door, and let their silence follow me like a second shadow. Starting over wasn't dramatic. It was clinical. Early shifts, late nights, a fridge that hummed louder than my phone ever did. I kept my head down and applied for every scholarship that didn't require a family recommendation. I told myself I didn't need backup, just bandwidth. There was one I'd pinned all my hopes to: the Whitaker Grant. Only 2 spots nationwide. I spent weeks on the essay Health Literacy in Underserved Communities case studies proposed impact. My advisor called it quiet brilliance. I submitted it with trembling fingers and a borrowed printer. 3 months later, I got the email. "We regret to inform you." It didn't break me, just made me tired. Weeks passed. Then, while digging through my inbox for something unrelated, I found a reply I hadn't seen dated the same week I applied. "Thank you for considering Amira Vance. After further discussion, she has chosen to withdraw her application. Best Delphine Vance." No subject line, no draft folder. Just her name sent clean and final. I didn't call. What would I have said? She would have called it a misunderstanding, a technical error. "I thought you changed your mind." I stared at the screen until the edges blurred, then printed a copy for my file. Not to confront her, but to remember. Not long after, during a guest lecture, a professor mentioned the Whitaker finalists. One stood out, she said. A project on healthcare access. Beautiful proposal. The recipient, Silas Vance. The name landed like a flat note. I stayed after class pretending to pack up slowly. Asked if we could see the winning essays for reference. She smiled and handed me a hard copy. The title was mine. The language was softer, a few metaphors I'd never use, but the bones were familiar. Identical structure. Even the closing quote, my quote, was there, slightly reworded. I remembered the night Silas stopped by my studio apartment just before the deadline. "I need help brainstorming," he said. "You're good at these things." I gave him my outline, even shared an early paragraph. "Just for structure," he promised. I pressed the page, flat took a photo, and slipped it into my folder. I didn't report it. I didn't ask for credit. I just learned to keep better records. Some betrayals don't show up as bruises. They come as scholarships you never got to claim. I didn't lose faith in myself, but I stopped expecting truth from anyone who had something to gain from my silence. So I kept building quietly. One paper, one rotation, one semester at a time. Until the day I walked back into a hospital I never meant to return to, and someone called me doctor before they called me daughter. The hallway outside Silas's ICU suite was quiet in that clinical way, full of soft beeps and tension that floats just beneath the fluorescent lights. I hadn't told anyone I was coming. I didn't owe them that. Delphine sat near the wall, her hands folded neatly around her phone like it was prayer. Russell was perched in the corner, arms crossed, legs wide, still performing authority, even when no one asked for it. Neither looked up as I approached. "Dr. Vance," the nurse said, stepping forward. "This way." I nodded. Her voice was bright, her posture respectful, like she'd read my name somewhere that mattered. Maybe she had. When I entered the room, I didn't pause. I glanced at the monitors, scanned the intake notes, reviewed his chart. Silas looked smaller than I remembered. Thinner. The kind of pale that doesn't come from low iron, but from being too long in a room where no one opens a window. He blinked once when he saw me, but said nothing. The nurse hovered near the door. "We adjusted his meds this morning. BP's still unstable, but no arrhythmia since noon." I nodded again, jotting a quick note into the tablet. "We'll keep him on this course. Continue to monitor oxygen saturation." "Of course, doctor." Doctor. Not sister, not daughter. Just the name I gave myself when theirs stopped meaning anything. As I stepped back from the bed, Delphine entered behind me. She didn't flinch, didn't speak, just looked past me, her gaze fixed on the IV drip like I wasn't 3 feet away. The nurse hesitated, then gestured. "Dr. Vance is consulting with our team today." Delphine didn't acknowledge her. "Or me." "That's not my daughter," she said, flat as marble. The nurse blinked. "Oh, I'm sorry. I thought she's from Seattle." Delphine's voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. It just landed like a gavel. I didn't respond. I just turned, slightly handed the chart back, and asked the nurse if she needed anything clarified. She shook her head, then added softly, "I read your paper last semester. Westline Review. We had to study it in health policy." I gave her a faint smile. The kind you offer when gratitude feels too dangerous. Behind me, Delphine's hands tightened around her purse. Her lips pressed thin, but she didn't say a word. I finished my notes, instructed the staff to notify me of any status changes, and stepped out. Russell looked up for the first time. His mouth opened slightly like he might ask something, but nothing came out. The hallway felt warmer now, like the building itself was watching. The silence I used to drown in now moved behind me like a shadow I'd outrun, and by the time I reached the elevator, I already knew what her call would sound like. The call came just before midnight. One missed ring, then a voicemail. Delphine's voice was softer than I remembered, tentative, like she was trying on humility for the first time in decades. "I know you're busy. I just wanted to say I was wrong. Maybe we could talk. Just coffee." I didn't reply. But the next morning I found myself sitting across from her in a cafe near the hospital, hands wrapped around a cup that had long since gone cold. "You look well," she said, eyes scanning me like I was someone else's daughter in her coat. "Busy," I replied, "but well." She nodded, smiled faintly. "Silas was surprised to see you." "We all were. It's impressive what you've done." There it was, the compliment that always came before the ask. "I know it's a lot to ask," she said, finally leaning in, "but we were wondering if there's any way you could help transfer Silas to your hospital. Better care, smoother recovery. You'd be overseeing it. It would mean so much." I set the cup down slowly. "I don't handle admissions," I said. "But with your title, your connections, I'm not going to make that call." Delphine's smile flickered. "Of course," she said quickly, tucking her hands beneath the table. "I just thought, thank you for meeting me," I said, already standing. She blinked like she hadn't prepared for the version of this conversation where I left first. I didn't give her time to finish the sentence. Back at the hotel, a thick envelope waited at the front desk. No return address. Just my name in Delphine's unmistakable cursive. Inside was a copy of a visa application sponsorship section filled out under my name, my credentials, my signature. Except I'd never seen it before. She'd used me. Again, I didn't call. I didn't text. I simply typed a response to the issuing office. "I do not consent. I was not consulted." I signed it as Dr. Amira Vance, printed 2 copies and placed one in my witness file. There would be no confrontation, no dramatic fallout. Just a line she wouldn't cross again, and a silence she could no longer weaponize. The invitation came through a colleague, a small private dinner for women in medicine, no microphones, no panels, just stories and soup. I almost declined. Applause still made me itch. But this wasn't public. It felt safe, close. So I went. The restaurant was tucked into a converted house off Capitol Hill. Low ceilings, warm lighting, quiet chatter between women in scrubs and soft sweaters. I hung my coat and took a seat at the far end of the table. That's when I saw her. "Eliza," she said, standing slowly. Her voice hadn't changed, just softened. A cousin on my mother's side. We hadn't seen each other in over a decade, but I recognized the eyes. She sat across from me, smiling like she wasn't sure if this counted as a reunion. "I read your piece," she said. Didn't know whether to be proud or worried. I tilted my head, worried for who she didn't answer. Not right away. We talked about the easy things, Seattle Weather Hospital hours, her daughter's art classes. Then, between the salad and dessert, her tone shifted. "You know," she said gently, "I always knew you were different. Not difficult. Just too strong for them." I didn't respond. "They never wanted to admit it," she continued. "But you scared them. Not in a bad way. Just, you moved things. And they liked things still." She stirred her tea. "You made Silas look small. Not by what you did, just by being who you were. And they never thought you'd fight back. They didn't think you had it in you." It landed harder than anything Delphine had ever said to my face. I nodded once. Eliza didn't offer an apology. She didn't need to. What she gave me was rarer truth, without spin, without performance. Later, I walked home alone through streets slick with late rain. Her words echoed against the sidewalk. "You scared them." I turned the phrase over in my head until it lost its edges. It wasn't an insult, it was an answer. And by the time I reached my door, I no longer needed to be sorry for taking up space they were never willing to share. I almost didn't say yes to the summit. The email sat in my inbox for weeks, buried beneath patient notes and department updates. But something about the title Healing Beyond the Hospital stuck with me. Maybe because I'd spent years learning that some wounds don't show up on scans. The room wasn't grand. No stage lights or velvet chairs, just folding tables, a podium, and rows of women in sensible flats and tired eyes. When they called my name, I stepped up without notes. I used to think love looked like support, I began. That the people who raised you would want to see you succeed. But I learned some only cheer when you follow the script they wrote. Silence, not hostile, just listening. When you grow beyond their expectations, when you build something without their permission, it's not always met with pride. Sometimes it's met with fear. I paused. But survival is a kind of success too. I stopped asking to be invited to the table when I realized I could build my own. Applause rose slowly, like people were giving themselves permission to feel it. I left through the side exit. No business cards, no photos, just the quiet satisfaction of telling the truth without asking anyone to believe it. 2 days later, the blog post went live. No headshot, no backstory. Just the headline, "When family doesn't show up, she builds her own seat." I didn't share it, but my name found its way into the comments. Not as someone's daughter, as someone who made her own name matter. She caught me near the coffee cart at the back of the conference hall, clutching her notebook like it might float away. "I know this is strange," she said, cheeks flushed, "but your article? It felt like my story." I smiled, not the kind I'd worn for years out of politeness, but something real. "Then write yours," I told her, louder than I did. She nodded slowly, like she was tucking the sentence into her coat pocket for later. That night back home, I pulled out an old journal from the bottom drawer of my desk. The leather was cracked, the corners curled. I hadn't touched it in years. I flipped past the first few entries, the ones written in dorm rooms and on buses between exams and tears, pages full of questions of wondering when they'd see me, if I'd ever earn my way back into a story they seemed so determined to write without me. I turned to a blank page, not to prove anything, just to remember. The pen moved slower than it used to, but the words felt steady. I said my name first, not to them, to myself. The phone rang. Unknown number, local area code. I let it ring once, then twice. On the third, I answered. Delphine's voice came through, soft and wavering. I know things weren't easy. But maybe, if there's still compassion in you, your brother. She didn't say my name. She didn't have to. I listened, not out of obligation, but as someone who had learned the power of not needing to reply. When she paused for breath, I pressed mute. Then I returned to the page and wrote the line I needed to see. The leaves had started turning near Volunteer Park, that slow golden fade that made the sidewalks look softer. I passed a family posing beneath a canopy of red maples, laughter camera clicks, jackets being zipped, names being called. I didn't flinch. I didn't wonder what it would have been like to be in a photo like that. I just kept walking. Back home, I slipped off my shoes, made tea I didn't drink, and opened the drawer in my hallway cabinet. Inside was the nameplate I had made the week I became chief, simple brushed steel clean lettering. Dr. Amira Vance. I ran my fingers across the engraving, the weight of it both heavier and lighter than I remembered. They never sent flowers, never clapped from the front row, never even said the title. But I did. And it turns out, I was the only one who ever needed to. I closed the drawer gently, not to hide it, but to keep it. Then I stood in the stillness, let it fill the corners of the room. They never said my name until everyone else did. And now I say it loud enough for myself.